Hello everyone, welcome to Geek Messages. In this video, we'll see how we can move virtual machines between two Hyper-V hosts with no shared storage. This technique is called as shared nothing live migration. So what does shared nothing live migration do? Shared nothing live migration allows us to move virtual machines between two Hyper-V hosts even if the virtual machines are stored in a non-shared storage such as DAS, direct attached storage, or a local storage. So with little or no infrastructure other than two Hyper-V hosts and with appropriate networking, you can now live migrate virtual machines between two Hyper-V hosts. If you can see my lab, I have set up a domain controller and two servers running as Hyper-V hosts. One is called Hyper-V01, another one is called Hyper-V02. Now, the domain controller and the two Hyper-V hosts are connected to a management network which has the subnet 192.168.10.x. Now, if you see here, Hyper-V01 is actually running a virtual machine on the local storage of Hyper-V01. And that virtual machine is actually a Windows client, and it's called Windows XP01 with the IP 192.168.10.201. Now down below we have another network only between these two Hyper-V hosts, which is used for live migration. If you see here, it has a different subnet 192.168.11.x. Our objective is to move this virtual machine from Hyper-V01 to Hyper-V02 over this live migration network. So whether you have a small infrastructure and want to be able to live migrate between a couple of hosts, or you have a large infrastructure but still have the virtual machine stored on direct attached storage, shared nothing live migration is one of the new features in Windows Server 2012 that will make your virtualization tasks easier. So I have set this lab and I have two Hyper-V hosts. Both Hyper-V hosts are running Windows Server 2012 R2. Each Hyper-V host has two network cards, one for management, which is also used for virtual machine network, another network adapter for live migration. So before we start doing the live migration of this virtual machine from one host to another host, let's look at the requirements that are needed for shared nothing live migration to work. So the first requirement is that both Hyper-V hosts must have CPUs from the same family. So it cannot be a mix of Intel and AMD processors. But if you have a mix of newer and older processors, but if they are from the same family, then you have to configure virtual machine CPU compatibility. In my case, both of my Hyper-V hosts are running the same processor, family, and speed. Now, if your virtual machine is connected to a virtual switch, then you need to have an identically named virtual switch on the destination Hyper-V host. If not, your migration will be paused while you specify which switch to use on the destination Hyper-V host. In my case, both of my Hyper-V hosts has a virtual switch and its name is identical on both of the Hyper-V hosts. So let me show you that. I'm on Hyper-V host 01, and if I go into Virtual Switch Manager, you can see I have a virtual switch called Production. Now, I need to have a switch on Hyper-V02 with the same name. So let me make sure of that. So I'm going to go into Hyper-V02 and I'll open Hyper-V Manager. If I come into Virtual Switch Manager, here you can see I have a virtual switch with the same name that I have on Hyper-V01. Both the the source and destination Hyper-V hosts must be connected by a reliable network. If you go back to my slides, both the hosts are connected using a reliable network. Either it can be the management network or it can be the live migration network. And both the source and destination Hyper-V hosts must belong to the same Active Directory domain. In my case, I have joined both the Hyper-V hosts to the same domain. And it is also recommended that you use a private network for live migration. If you look at my slide, I have a separate network for live migration. And the last requirement is that we have to make sure that the account that we use to perform live migration is a member of Hyper-V administrators group. So if I come into Active Directory and open up Active Directory users and computers, under built-in, you can see a domain local security group, and in that we need to make sure that the account that we are going to use to perform live migration is a member of this group. So in our case, we are going to use the domain admin credentials to perform the live migration. So I'm going to type in administrator and click OK again. So now the domain admin is a member of this group. So to perform live migration, you need to enable live migration on the Hyper-V hosts, which will be used to send and receive the virtual machine. Okay, let me log into the Hyper-V host, which will be used to send the virtual machine. In our case, it'll be Hyper-V01. So in Hyper-V Manager, we have to click on Hyper-V Settings under Action Pane. And on the left side, you can see Live Migrations. And on the right side, you got to check Enable Incoming and Outgoing Live Migrations. You can also specify how many live migrations you would like to do simultaneously. By default, it's going to do 2 live migrations simultaneously. And under incoming live migrations, you have 2 options. You can specify the network that you want to use to receive an incoming virtual machine. So you have 2 options. First one is you can use any available network for live migration. So in that case, it's going to either use the management or the virtual machine network, or if you have a dedicated network such as a live migration network, it can also use that. Depending on your network configuration and bandwidth availability, you can either use any available network for live migration, or you can specify the IP address for live migration. In my case, I will select use these IP addresses for live migration, and I've specified the IP address of my live migration network adapter. So if you see here, I have a dedicated network adapter used for live migration, and if I click on status, I can look at the IP, which is 192.168.11.1. That is the IP that I've specified here by clicking Add button. Now if you expand live migration option on the left side, you can see the advanced features of live migration, such as authentication protocol performance option. For the authentication protocol, you can either use Credential Security Support Provider, which is CRED SSP, or you can use Kerberos. Now, if you're going to use Credential Security Support Provider, you need to make sure that you have logged on to the server from where you are going to initiate the live migration of the virtual machine. To use the Kerberos, you need to make sure that the computer account has been set up for constrained delegation. Now, Kerberos is more secure than CRED SSP. Now, coming to the performance option, you have 3 options, and they are TCP/IP, compression, SMB. TCP/IP, what it does, it's going to copy the memory of the virtual machine that being migrated to the destination server over a TCP/IP connection. Compression is going to do the same thing, but it will compress the data and then it will copy over to the destination server. We have another option which is SMB, which is going to do the same thing over a SMB connection, but to use this option, your network adapters should support RDMA, which is Remote Directory Memory Access. In our case, we are going to use the compression option. So I'm going to click on OK. Now you got to make sure that you have set the same thing on Hyper-V 02. So let me make sure that. I'm going to click on Hyper-V settings, live migration, enable incoming and outgoing live migration is checked. And this is the IP of my live migration network adapter on 02. It looks okay. And if I come into advanced features, I am using CRED SSP, and for the performance option, compression has been selected. So everything looks okay for me. So we are ready to migrate a virtual machine from one host to another host. Now I'm going to come back into Hyper-V 01, and before I start the live migration, I am going to set a continuous ping for the virtual machine which is running on this Hyper-V host. Alright, so I'm going to right click on Windows XP 01. I'll click on Move and I'll click Next on Before You Begin screen. Now on the Choose Move Type screen, you have two options. You can either move the virtual machine, optionally its storage, to another Hyper-V host, or you can move only the virtual machine storage to another location such as local storage or a shared storage. Now in our case, we will select move the virtual machine because we would like to move the virtual machine as well as its storage. So I'm going to click this option and I'll click next. Now on the specified destination computer screen, you got to enter the name of the destination Hyper-V hosts. So in our case, that will be Hyper-V 02. I'll click next. On the choose move option screen, you get three options. The first option is move the virtual machine's data to a single location. Now, using this option, you can move all of the virtual machine's data, which are virtual hard disks, configuration files, memory state, and checkpoints, all into one location that you specify. The second option is move the virtual machine's data by selecting where to move the items. Using this option, you can specify the destination location for each virtual machine item that you want to move. You can specify different location for each virtual machine item. For example, you can move virtual hard disks to one folder, and you can move the other configuration files and the checkpoint files to another folder. Now the third option is move only the virtual machine. Using this option, you can only move the virtual machine but not the virtual hard disks. So to use this option, virtual machines' virtual hard disks should be stored on a shared storage. In my case, I will select the option move the virtual machine's data to a single location because this option allows you to specify one location for all of the virtual machine's data, including your virtual hard disks, configuration files, memory state, and checkpoints. So I'm going to click on this option and I'll click next. On the choose a new location for virtual machine screen, you have to enter the location on the destination Hyper-V host where you would like to store the virtual machine's data. So if I click browse, it'll show me the disk drives which are available on Hyper-V 02. So in this case, I'm going to go into C drive, users, public, documents, Hyper-V, and I've already created a folder called Windows XP 01. So I'm going to save everything into this folder. So I'll click select folder. This screen will also tell you how big your files are. If you see here under source location, the size of the virtual machine data that we are going to transfer is 1.75 gig. So I'm going to click next. So let's review the summary. This is the virtual machine that we are going to move, and the type of move includes moving the virtual machine as well as the storage, and the destination Hyper-V host is Hyper-V02, and these are the items which we are going to move to the new location. So we are going to move the virtual hard disk inside a folder called virtual hard disks under Windows XP01. And under Windows XP01, we are going to save all the other files such as configuration files, checkpoints, smart paging, and the move method is going to use the compression. So I'm going to click Finish. Now that your virtual machine migration is in progress, you can watch the progress bar in two places. One in the performing the move progress bar, and another one is in the Hyper-V manager. So if you look at the status, it says it has completed 7%. The one place where you would not be able to watch the progress is from within the virtual machine. There is nothing to see because if you are in the VM while the migration is happening, there is no indication of it, and you'll be able to continue as normal. So the operating system within the VM itself has no concept that it is virtualized, and therefore has no concept that it is being moved. Should the live migration fail, the virtual machine would experience nothing. It would continue to work on the source host as if nothing had happened. Now we no longer see Windows XP01 virtual machine because it has been migrated to Hyper-V02. So if I come here, I can see my Windows XP01 up and running on Hyper-V02. Alright, so this is how you do live migration of virtual machines which is not on shared storage. Thanks for watching this video. For more videos, please subscribe to my channel.